everyone. My name is Quatoya Murray, and I would like to thank you all for joining Brave New Films and Black Voters Matter for a very special live stream of Suppressed and Sabotage, The Fight to Vote. We are providing you this film for free to the public as a nonprofit organization that provides all of our documentaries to the public for free as an opportunity to spark change. And all of these documentaries are available on our website and on our social media. If you are a group or an organization, you can use any of our films to fundraise. Your active participation in today's screening is a very important step in helping us mobilize and make change, and also for allowing Brave New Films and Black Voters Matter to continue to mobilize in our communities. We appreciate Senator Bernie Sanders for his collaboration on our screening and for his consistent leadership in the fight for social justice and against corruption. Mr. Sanders has been a longtime supporter and friend of Brave New Films since the release of Outfoxed in 2004. And now, without further ado, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me begin by thanking Black Voters Matter for the work you are doing to protect and expand voting rights. The election in November is the most important election in the modern history of our country. Democracy is at stake, and for the future of our kids and future generations, this is an election we cannot lose. As everyone knows, our country has had a long and shameful history of voter suppression. We have been engaged in an ongoing project for many, many years now to expand participation in our democracy. Thankfully, we have made some real progress in that struggle. But our work is not done, not even close. In fact, as all of you know, the right to vote is now under severe attack in the United States of America. People who cannot win elections based on their ideas hope to win them by making it impossible for their opponents to vote. This is outrageous, this is un-American, and this is something we will not accept. Donald Trump and cowardly Republican politicians all over this country are working overtime to suppress the vote. Instead of trying to increase voter turnout, they are making it harder and harder for people to participate in the political process. It is not acceptable that in America, people sometimes wait on lines for hours to vote, as long as 7 or 8 hours in the United States of America. That is not an accident. That is voter suppression. And it is what Trump and the Republican leadership want. If we are serious about calling ourselves a democracy, we must defeat this effort at voter suppression and firmly establish that the right to vote is an inalienable and universal principle that applies to all American citizens 18 years of age and older. Our goal must be to increase voter turnout, not decrease it. As American citizens, all of us are entitled to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and all the other freedoms enshrined in our Bill of Rights. And to my mind, at the top of that list is the right to vote. So at a time when voter suppression is taking place all over this country, we must make it clear that casting a ballot for American citizens is not a privilege, it is a basic, fundamental, constitutional right. Please know that I am with you in this fight. In this difficult moment in American history, we must do what Americans have always done when change is needed. We must stand together, organize, and fight for the country we know we can become. Thanks very much. Keep up the great work.
New voter ID laws
effort to purge voter rolls ahead of the 2024 election.
States are seeing more threats to election workers.
Armed individuals showing up at polling locations.
Photos of people with their faces covered, wearing tactical gear, and carrying guns.
Targeting voters of color, young people, people with disabilities, working class Americans.
Closing polling places in our community, eliminating drop boxes in our community.
We are witnessing a tidal wave of voter suppression around the country.
Driven by Donald Trump's claims of a stolen election, we see states across the country passing laws that make it harder for some people to vote.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now.
If you want to understand how voter suppression can actually impact the outcome of the election, just go back to 2018 in Georgia in the governor's race between Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams.
Georgia greased the wheels of the voter suppression machine that ultimately was replicated across the country.
Stacey Abrams looking to make history by becoming the nation's first female African-American governor.
Pull back that veneer, and you see something really rotten happening. It's almost like termites coming in. They're in the wood, they're eating the wood away, and you don't even realize your house is getting ready to collapse until it's almost too late.
My name is Lewis Brooks. I live in Thomaston, Georgia, Upson County. And I've been living here my whole 89 years, except the 2 years I spent in service in Korea. In I believe it was 55 or 56, that's when they started to letting black people vote in Upson County. When I went to register to vote, it was tough. They asked me all kind of questions to try to keep me from registering. I passed the test. Once I got my voting right, I decided I wasn't going to let anything stop me from voting. Because I used to walk. We go up the street here, across the next street over there. I walk over there and walk back and vote. And I didn't miss a voting, except when they closed the poll. I'm a citizen. It's my right to vote and speak my opinion. Now, I got disabled and I couldn't do no driving. I know I couldn't afford to go that far to vote. This was in a black neighborhood. It made me feel like they would close it down to keep the black people from voting, because most black people vote Democrat. They only closed one white voting place. Everybody from out here in the black side go clean over there to the white section to vote. We're human, and we have our rights to vote just like anybody else.
Restricting access to polling stations is a staple tactic of voter suppression in America.
Texas leads the nation in polling place closures, having shut down 750 precincts in the past decade in largely Latino and Black areas.
The state slashed the number of polling places from 3,700 to just 170, a 95% reduction.
That in Jefferson County, in the county that has half of the state's black population, the number of polling locations was actually brought down to 1.
A major Supreme Court decision on voting rights, upholding Arizona voting restrictions.
One criminalizes the collection of ballots by third parties.
The Felix family is pretty large here in Yuma. For some of us who live down in the counties, that would be about anywhere from 30 to 100 miles away from the nearest polling place. Some of my family members are disabled. Some of them cannot drive miles away. Some don't have access to vehicles. With the new restrictions on collecting ballots, that is going to restrict hundreds of my family. It's silencing the votes of many, many rural Arizona people.
You know, the Democrats are working hard, registering all these minority voters, and if they can do that, they can win these elections in November.
Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
This is Fulton County, Georgia. Most of my professional career has been in public service of one kind or another, as a teacher, as a government worker. I moved here in August of this year, but because of my emphasis on always being registered and always having the ability to vote, I did that almost immediately when I got here. Of course, I also knew the importance of the upcoming election, and I wanted to be a part of that history. It got closer and closer and closer to the election, and I was getting a little bit concerned, so I called the Secretary of State's office. My name is not on the roll. They can't tell me where it is. So all of that paperwork that I sent in, I don't know where it is. I'm 65, and for the first time, I did not get a chance to vote in a very close election of historic importance and proportion.
Hold on, keep your eyes on the prize.
What happened in Georgia in 2018 became the model for what's now happening in states all across the country, affecting thousands of voters.
In Arizona, a critical state in the 2024 election, Republican lawmakers have been working to obstruct people from registering to vote.
92,000 voter registrations were challenged last year.
The proposed legislation creates new requirements for third-party voting organizations helping people register to vote.
In a way, our legislators are actually trying to intimidate those of us who are doing the work in our state.
Civil rights leaders say Kemp is illegally removing people from Georgia's voters list.
Thousands are purged from Georgia's voting rolls.
Purged from Georgia's voting rolls. 890 had no idea they could vote.
Other states use the same over who's been removed from the voter roll.
There has been instance after instance of unlawful voter purging. States are removing voters, many of whom have actually been found to have been eligible but were unlawfully removed from the rolls.
I received the purge notice. So I open it up and I read the first sentence. I, along with 380,000 Georgians, received the same notice.
That's an especially pernicious way to prevent people from voting, because once you register to vote, you would think that you should be able to remain on the rolls. And once you're removed from the rolls, you cannot vote.
I went out and got the mail, and there were 2 letters in there. They looked official. You're hereby notified that the city of Thunderbolt has challenged your right to vote. The city of Thunderbolt states that you no longer reside within the municipality. My license is valid, my address is valid, I own this home. Why are you questioning my right to vote?
You know, the purges, they've been going on for decades, maybe over a century in this state.
Brian Kemp is notorious for erasing the polls and purging people right before the election deadline.
He needed to have his hands on the levers.
You have an umpire who is also playing in the game.
Zooming out to a national view, purging eligible people from voter rolls has become a key play in the voter suppression playbook.
In the Arizona State Senate, vote to purge people from the permanent early voting list.
The bill will put unresponsive voters on a suspense list. If they hadn't cast a ballot in 2 consecutive elections, they'd be kicked off the voter rolls.
We're going to take this list after we've scrubbed it and ask that they be removed from these rolls.
Secretary of State Frank LaRose directed the deactivation of 27,000 Ohio voters.
Thousands of Mississippians have been purged from the voter rolls.
Georgia Republicans introduced a new bill that would make it easier to kick voters off the rolls.
10 days after McWhorter learned his voter registration had been challenged, he defended his right to vote before the election board.
I paid taxes here for 20 years, even though I was homeless.
To disenfranchise a certain demographic. You're trying to put your foot on someone else's neck.
The governor's race has already won for the history books, but it's also seeing record numbers of requests for absentee ballots, especially from African American voters.
My name is Norman Broderick. I'm in Powder Springs, Georgia, Cobb County. I did 24 years in the military, deployed to Iraq twice, Bosnia, Saudi Arabia. I voted absentee before when I was deployed. When I was in Iraq the first time, I voted absentee, and when I was in Iraq the second time, I voted absentee. The absentee ballot is a very important tool that exists to allow people, not only just the military, but anybody who happens to be away from their voting station, to be able to cast their vote.
My name is Peggy Shu. I'm from Johns Creek, Georgia. I left Georgia for DC in the beginning of October, and before I left, I mailed out my absentee ballot application so that our registrar would send an absentee ballot to my new DC address.
I work at U.S. Army Central, which is located at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina. I'm away from home during the week. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get back to Georgia to vote. I could only do this absentee. I filled out everything I was supposed to fill out. I sent their documents in. I got confirmation that it was received. And to my surprise, I did not receive my absentee ballot.
I checked my mailbox every day. It was like nearing the end of the month. And so I started calling the voter protection hotline. I called my registrar. I sent emails, and it was really getting close to the election date. And I never received my ballot. The election day came and went, and I wasn't able to vote in the end.
When I contacted my wife and asked her about it, I think it was a couple of days before the election, it came here. And I tried contacting the Georgia Elections Board. I was told they did receive my absentee ballot request. Everything was filled out correctly, but that they mailed it to the wrong address. She admitted that yes, they did mess up, it was their fault. But there was nothing I could do about it. It's too late, it's over with, and my vote will not be counted during this election.
It was probably one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced. After having spent, my entire college career very invested in the political process, it was, like a punch to the gut.
It still pisses me off to this day. Being in Baghdad, voting absentee was easier than being 4 hours away trying to vote absentee in South Carolina.
I took to Facebook, and like the millennial activist that I am, I recounted my experience in a Facebook post. I wrote, "This is what happened. I wasn't able to vote, and if you had a similar experience, let me know." And my friend from high school, she reached out to me and she said, "I also had struggles trying to get my ballot in." Over the course of 48 hours, we had 40 people. So many people in our immediate Facebook circle knew somebody who had a similar experience to us.
People have requested it far in advance. Some people just didn't get their vote in.
That was when we really realized that this was not an isolated incident. It was a much bigger issue and a much more deeper rooted sort of phenomenon that was going on.
Today, we've worked to get answers about the claim that thousands of voters never got the absentee ballots they requested.
About half of 2020 voters said that they voted by mail or absentee, which is a record number.
Today, the state Supreme Court ruled that ballot drop boxes are illegal in Wisconsin.
The court also ruled that another person can't drop off your ballot for you.
You're making it impossible for Americans to vote.
The Arizona Republican Party wants to do away with the most popular form of voting in our state.
An unprecedented number of mail-in ballot applications have been rejected.
They put a new law on the books that will give voters less time to request absentee ballots, strict new ID requirements for absentee ballots, slash the number of ballot drop boxes.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed new voting reform legislation into law. The law includes limits on drop boxes and changes to how people sign up for vote by mail.
I missed out on a pivotal city council race last year because I did not realize that I had been removed from vote by mail. I did not get any notification. Unfortunately, I will have to re-enroll every cycle now after each election is over.
Great Tuesday morning, election day.
I live in the South. I'm always worried about election day.
Have a great morning and go vote.
Oh yeah, gotta go vote today.
Since I became a citizen, I have not missed an election. I showed up and a very nice lady, she looked at my ID and said, "No, you're not registered." And I said, no, wait a second. Here's my registration card, and showed them that I was registered. And they said, yeah, but your name is Del Rio with a space, but your voter ID says Del Rio one word, and therefore it doesn't match. In the voter registration, my name shows as Del Rio with a space. My ID is Del Rio, no space. That was a non-match. I said, this is not legal and I need to be allowed to vote. After much discussion, they said to me, this time we'll allow you to vote, but it's a little bit like they're doing me a favor. The right to vote should be something that we should make easier rather than more difficult.
Controversy surrounds the state's exact match law that put the registrations of 53,000 voters, most of them African Americans, on hold because of discrepancies in the way their names are spelled in state databases.
People of color have names that are a little bit less typical, and that's where the errors are at their highest. Brian Kemp knows this.
The policy has slowly been spreading across the country to require ID, and it's now required in 36 states. North Carolina will now require ID for elections in all forms of voting.
A proof of citizenship voting law.
It's going to have a disparate impact on naturalized citizens, people who live in rural communities, and tribal voters.
A new voter ID law in Missouri.
27,500 voters could be disenfranchised by this voter ID law alone, enough to swing a close election. 200,000 more people would have voted in Wisconsin if not for their strict voter ID law. Trump only won the state by 23,000 votes. The largest drop-off was among black and Democratic-leaning voters.
You know that a lot of Republicans have not been able to win in Wisconsin.
And now we have photo ID, and I think photo ID is going to make a little bit of a difference.
I've always voted. Every election I voted. I wanted to cast my vote. When people tell you and you can't use your current ID, you feel kind of out of place. But I didn't know that I wasn't going to be able to vote.
A group of students will not have their voices heard at the polls, at least not in Georgia.
They're turning a bunch of students away over here.
We're showing up here and at the Booker T. Washington location, and their names were not on the actual roll.
First, they told me I was at the wrong polling station.
They said, you didn't get registered. I was like, what do you mean?
And there was only about 4 voting ballot booths.
They didn't process my registration didn't go through. I walked back to my dorm and said, I guess I just won't vote.
Just before I went to vote, I had been in an African American history class where we were actually talking about voter suppression, about what was it like for people that were going to vote. I filled out a little slip of paper, gave it to the poll workers. They looked up at me and they said, it's coming up in our system as though you're not a citizen of the United States. I just sort of looked at them like they had two heads. Like, I'm sorry, I was born in New York, what? The thing was that I had brought proof that I was a US citizen. I had with me my driver's license, my passport card, and my Emory student ID, but they would not look at the passport card whatsoever to prove that I was a citizen. I walked out crying. What I learned in history class just hours before, this happened to me in 2018.
A Texas representative is proposing a bill that would ban polling locations on college campuses.
How can we expect freshmen who've never voted before, don't have a car, to get out to the elections office?
Texas allows a concealed gun license to vote, but will not include college IDs.
Ohio college students will face voting barriers with the new Ohio voter ID laws.
It removes student IDs as a valid form of voter identification.
Idaho is joining Texas, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, and Tennessee as states that don't accept any form of student IDs to vote.
Removing student IDs from the list of valid forms of identification. We know what you're doing. You don't want students to vote.
Been here for 3 hours, 4 or 5 hour wait. 5 hours.
This is way, way too long for us to stay and vote.
How long have you waited in line here?
About 3.5 hours.
And have you decided you can't stand it? You can't take it anymore? Or are you going to go home?
I'm hurting. I'll be back. I got to go take some medicine.
It was really good. The lines weren't too long and everyone was super helpful.
We don't hardly ever have to wait here. It's always a pleasant experience up here.
If you have a fixed resource, an easy way to suppress the vote is to just make that resource unavailable to the people who you don't want to vote. And that's exactly what happened in the 2018 election here in the state of Georgia. In places like North Fulton County, which are wealthy, there were more machines than anyone could ever use. In black neighborhoods, there were a quarter of the number of machines that were needed to service the population.
Lots of people left without voting.
It was people just dropping off when it became 2 hours, 3 hours, 4th hour. It was very heartbreaking.
All it takes is a little walking away at 159 counties to influence an election. A little here, a little there, and then in a race like this, which was so close, there you go.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been appalling.
Governor Brian Kemp signed the state's voter suppression law under a painting of a plantation.
The voter suppression that we saw in Georgia for the 2018 election between Kemp and Abrams was really just a precursor to the voter suppression laws that we're now seeing across the country. They're all based on the same big lie of voter fraud that Donald Trump has been pushing.
The 2020 election was the most secure in U.S. history.
11 fake electors gathered weeks after the 2020 election to sign this document, claiming to be duly elected and qualified to cast Arizona's 11 electoral votes for
Donald J. Trump.
Arizona was among 7 key states that saw fake electors sign documents to subvert the Electoral College process.
Before the big lie took hold, we were facing a variety of voter suppression tactics, allowing a democratic process to move forward, but compromising who could participate in it. Once the big lie was introduced, it was as if we jettisoned elections altogether.
We're building an army of the awakened. We're taking over election boards. We're flooding the zone with poll workers, poll watchers. There's going to be MAGA in the room counting the votes.
Call it election sabotage. Because really, that is what these laws are designed for. They're designed to allow partisan officials to sabotage valid election results.
He will kill you. We will demand an audit. He will demand the truth. Your family, your life. Watch your back.
Not long after the former president tweeted at me, I received the first specific threat. You lied. You're a traitor. Gave my address. Mentions my wife by name, mentions my kids by name.
The staff started getting all sorts of calls threatening that people were going to come and kill everyone in their offices or in their chairs.
Time's running out, Richard. We're coming after you and every motherfucker that stole this election. You're going to be served lead.
I'm going to hang you, traitor.
Give him an Alabama necktie, you piece of shit.
18,000 voters having to do with Ruby Freeman. She's a vote scammer.
Of Ruby Freeman and Shay Freeman Moss, quite obviously, surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine.
I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me
and my daughters.
You should go into Detroit, and you should go into Philadelphia, and you should go into some of these places, Atlanta, and we got to watch those votes when they come in.
Donald Trump said there was rampant fraud. He didn't say it was happening everywhere. He said it's happening in Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Fulton County, Georgia, Maricopa County, Arizona, Harris County, Texas, large urban centers with large populations of color, blaming non-existent election fraud on Black election workers.
I think election subversion is literally the most dangerous threat that we have for democracy right now.
When you are saying things like, no one can win unless my candidate wins, you are really creeping towards authoritarian rule. And that is something completely different than we have seen in the past.
They recognize that a rising electorate of a multicultural America that happened to be Latino, Black, Asian, and young shared and espoused very different values of what America's future should be. And so instead of fighting for those policy positions, what they decided to do instead was to be politically expedient, to be sloppy, to cheat.
We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought and suffered and died to give us in the first place.
You see how hard they are working to suppress your voice. That means that there is value in it.
Educate your friends and family, your coworkers, your community.
We should be burning their phone lines up right now around voting rights.
Register people to vote. Register your friends, your family, talk to everyone. Become a poll worker, get trained.
If you don't like something, you can either, volunteer or run for office.
We have to be organized and we have to be engaged.
The entire American experiment of a multiracial democracy is at stake this year. That's the question that's on the table right now.
Any voter suppression law is not just about Black people, it is about America itself.
On my mother's dying bed at 92 years old, former sharecropper, her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
We've got to make democracy together.
From sea to shining sea.
Wow, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us to watch this timely screening of Suppressed and Sabotage, The Fight to Vote. My name is Anisha Hardy. I am the Executive Director for Alabama Values Progress, a media advocacy organization that leverages narrative strategies, media, and culture to raise awareness around community issues and to advocate for pro-democracy values, policies, and voices. Tonight's documentary shines a spotlight on the urgent issue of voter suppression and election subversion. I truly believe that film has a unique power to ignite dialogue and discussion and to close the knowledge gap on these pressing community issues. By bringing these stories to the forefront, we can inspire people to act and work towards creating a more just and equitable society. And watching that film, coming to mind, I'm like, make no mistake that voter suppression tactics, that they are targeting Black voters. These tactics are deeply rooted in the legacy, upholding the legacy of white supremacy. And they are alarmingly on the rise, particularly in the South, a region with the highest percentage of Black voters. These tactics include restrictive ID laws, voter roll purges, gerrymandering, and polling place closures. And they are strategically designed to disenfranchise communities of color and maintain, systemic racial inequality. These barriers to voting ultimately dilutes the voice of Black voters and uphold the status quo of the privileged few. And so I say that because this ongoing battle for voting rights is a fight for democracy. It is a fight against the enduring impact of the legacy of white supremacy in our political system and other social institutions. And so with that, I am privileged to moderate the next portion of our program, a fireside chat with two extraordinary leaders who have been at the forefront of the battle for voting rights and social justice. I would like to welcome to the conversation Rosemary McCoy, the co-founder of Harriet Tubman Freedom Fighters, and Ryan Wagner, the Senior Policy Manager for Black Voters Matter. Hey. Hello.
Hey, long time no see.
Yes, yes, no. Oh my gosh, the film. It was timely. It did a great job of covering in 30 minutes the ongoing fight, to counter the attacks on voting rights and counter, voter suppression. So thank you all for joining. And I say, let's just dive in. Let's start with brief introductions. Let's kick off with you, Rosemary. If you could just share a bit about your journey and what drives your work in voter advocacy, that'd be great.
All right. And I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, everyone. And I joined the military and I received an honorable discharge due to a near fatal automobile collision. My last duty station was in Jacksonville, Florida, Naval Base. And but my life changed in 2013. After I was arrested in 2013, after fighting 14 months in county jail for my innocence, I accepted a plea agreement. I was sent to state prison for 7 months. And when I was released, I completed 18 months of probation. And after that, I got involved with Amendment 4, and I vowed that I would register 1,000 people and I would increase voter turnout. And today, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, I call it the enslaved compromise. It really keeps me motivated and, fight and to continue this here fight. So that is what I truly believe in, true liberation.
No, thank you. One, thank you for your service, and also thank you for your commitment. I say real change happens when just everyday people make a commitment to the collective liberation of their community. And so thank you for just being, an advocate in this space. Ryan, hey, look, can you tell us about your awesome work with Black Voters Matter and your experience in electoral and social justice work?
I always tell people I kind of stumbled into the work. I started out as an organizer. There weren't many types of the work, if you will, for me starting out. So organizing was like my foray into the world of politics in general. Kind of a little bit jealous of Gen Z because they have all these lanes now. They don't even have to think about, volunteering or for a campaign or interning for an elected official now. There's so many avenues available to them. So that's how I started my work. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. It's in the blood. Adopted by Florida later. And what drives me is that I feel like I'm walking in my purpose, right? This is not just a career path for me. I do believe in this. It's in an alignment with my values. And I got lucky enough to find, ultimately, when I decided to leave electoral work, I found social justice work and movement work from the nonprofit lens. And I've been here ever since, and I absolutely love it. Policy is my favorite thing. I'm a nerd at heart, and my role at the end of the day is to connect policy with the people, policy with community, because working in silos is not beneficial to our communities at all long term if we are in fact really about that action, that liberation and freedom mindset and ideology. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Yeah, no, the policy piece is important. If we're talking about disrupting systems, that, we have to have that conversation. Like, we have to have that policy conversation, because I often tell people, unfortunately, some of these systems are working the way they were designed to work. Right. And so, thank you for the work that you're doing, through the policy lens and advocating in that, in that space. So let's let's just, while the film is still fresh on our mind, let's reference the film because I can talk to y'all all evening.
Right.
So the film, it uses the 2018 Georgia, the Georgia race between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp as a case study. And we all remember that race. In 2018, we at that race we saw a range of suppression tactics, purging of voter rolls, long wait lines at polling stations, strict voter ID requirements. The film illustrated that for us. In these tactics, they disproportionately impact underserved and underrepresented communities, particularly Black voters. And these tactics are not just native to Georgia. We saw these tactics happening across the country, particularly across the South, which holds the highest concentration of Black voters in, underrepresented and underserved communities. So Rosemary, I just want to turn to you for a second. What specific tactics did you observe, in the 2018 election, and also in other states?
Well, all that you mentioned, the closing sites in predominantly Black community, as it was stated in the film, over 60% of Chatham County, Georgia, voted Democrat. So I also noticed that the film, the demonstrated counties are purged at a rate of almost 4 times. The Democratic counties are rated almost 4 times that the Republican counties. And one thing like Linda, for instance, Linda was one of the victims that moved, and she completed all her paperwork as, required to do. Mm-hmm. And she waited and waited. And when she realized that she wasn't going to get her voter registration card, she contacted the secretary and found out that she wasn't even put on the roll. And by that time, it was too late for her to vote. The other military gentleman, he was in the military overseas, and he submitted his paperwork for the absentee ballot, and he wasn't. They said they mailed it to the wrong address, so he wasn't allowed to vote. So these situations continue to happen. And the other thing that I noticed was the attack on the elderly. The gentleman, I believe his name was Lewis Brooks, he was able to walk to the polling site. But as he got older, they moved the polling site from a predominantly Black community into a predominantly white community. And the distance, he wasn't able to drive, he wasn't able to walk, and now he wasn't able to vote. So these are tactics that they are using. And that Lincoln Park, their poll site is still closed, has not reopened. Duval County tried us. The city council, they tried to gerrymander. You came on board, Harvard Law School came on board, they represented us, and guess what? We won. And that's what I say, when we fight back, we win. When we get out to vote, we win. So I just want to encourage everyone that's listening, get out to vote, encourage someone to vote, ask at least 5 people to vote, and tell them to ask 5 people to vote. Thank you. That's my story.
Yes, no, and thank you for closing out with a call to action.
That's what we do.
That's what I know. In true advocacy fashion. Ryan, I want to turn to you, Ryan. We've seen a rise in voter suppression tactics. Since 2018, but we can also go back, especially since the 2013 Shelby v. Holder ruling and removal of the pre-clearance, Section 5. There's data now. We've had enough elections that have taken place since that ruling where there's data. The Brennan Center for Justice released a report last year showing that since the Shelby v. Holder ruling, states have have passed 100 restrictive voting laws. So, voter suppression tactics, they have become more sophisticated and varied, it's not new, but, the approach, right? And we've seen everything, again, from the restricted voter ID laws to the purge of voter rolls, reducing early access to the poll. Any way that we can increase access or make the access equitable to the ballot, we're seeing those, those efforts being attacked. Ryan, can you speak to the rise of voter suppression tactics that you've observed recently? And what forms are these tactics taking, and how can we, recognize them?
So, from my personal experience, I had a front row seat to the tyranny of Ron DeSantis. So, following my appearance in this documentary, I had another issue come up with the election police force. And you know me well enough now, I'm not one to be bullied, especially by someone who has made it his personal mission to target Black people in the state of Florida. Had a law enforcement officer call me, asking me, he said he was looking for me by any means necessary, said he came to the house. Turns out he came to my parents' house. It was a whole thing. And so now I would say it's an escalation of tactics. It's so far beyond voter ID laws. We're at the point where you have Southern governors, right wingers, who are obsessed with bringing back the Confederacy, that will go so far as to remove duly elected Black officials, particularly in Florida. Monique Worrell. It's something about Black women that irks the soul of Ron DeSantis, and I love it. You've had in North Carolina, believe she's the only Black Supreme Court justice on the state court, have to fight for her job because, God forbid, she wants equity and inclusion when it comes to the bench and the attorneys being treated fairly before they come before her court. So it's an escalation. Okay. In addition to the purges, the restrictive changes to absentee ballots in some states is you practically need a doctor's note, right? And just this year, 6 states enacted 7 restrictive laws. Alabama, Dr. Alabama was first out the gate. Alabama and Tennessee were fighting for control, right? And so, to put a bow on it, it's not stopped. It's an escalation. The idea that this country is changing offends a lot of people, right? And so there's this power grab, this protection of, to be quite honest, a white supremacist power structure, because God forbid you have to share power. This idea that sharing power means you're taking from me is a huge narrative, right? So, and it's fueling a lot of this. This is ultimately, I would argue, a backlash to Barack Obama being president, a backlash, to, I would argue, Citizens United. You've got folks that have all the money in the world, playing in states that they don't even call home, controlling our political narratives. And so I would say it's an escalation.
Yeah, no, you said something, and I think it's important for the folks that are watching to even put that in like a more concise context, because you talked about like we're witnessing an all-out fight for control, right, to maintain power. And you talked about the country like changing. This country, often say, this country is becoming more diverse in terms of political, social, and cultural ideology. And then if we're talking about numbers, white men make up 30% of the U.S. population, but they hold over 60% of all elected offices. That math ain't mathing. Make it make sense, right? And so we are witnessing an all-out fight to maintain like a minority, like rule, right, control. And so I'm going to take a note out of Rosemary's book and close that statement out with saying, get out and vote. Like your vote holds power. It's important. You hear the phrase all power to the people, but truly all power to the people. These folks work for us. It's not the other way around. And we do have power, and voting is one of those powers. And, one way to keep people disempowered is create barrier to information about the power that they have. And so to you all's point, we have work to do to make sure that voters are educated, that they're tapped in, that they're engaged, and that they're mobilized around every election. So I want to pivot a little bit to a topic that's actually been, discussion in voting rights restoration. I think as we talk about, voting rights, I think voting rights restoration is a battle for justice and equality as well, especially in light of like legislative challenges that we've seen to it. Rosemary, this is for you. After the passage of Amendment 4 in Florida, which restored the voting rights of over 1.4 million residents who had, completed the requirements. The introduction of the SB 7066 created, significant challenges to that. This law required individuals to pay fines and fees and restitution before they could, vote again. But that disproportionately impacted low-income, individuals. And as someone who has been directly impacted by that law, and as a plaintiff in a suit that was challenging it, can you share your experiences and thoughts on the ongoing fight for voting rights restoration? Like, how has laws such as SB 7066 affected, low-income individuals or underserved communities? And what steps do you think can be taken to address these challenges and ensure, equitable access to the ballot?
Sure. Yes. We consider
unmute for me, Rosemary.
Poll tax, and Southern Poverty Law Center at the time, it was Attorney Nancy Abadu. She is now Honorable Justice Nancy Abadu of this 11th Circuit Court Appeals Court. So we are just so grateful and so happy that we do have law firms that are assisting us in doing the work that we need to do. But one of the things that I found is that SB 7066, it put a damper on millions. It's past 1.4, 1.5 million because people are being released every day. So, so the number continues to grow. And but when we passed Amendment 4, it was an excitement. It was almost like Juneteenth. Everyone was out shouting, and because that was a Jim Crow law that we got rid of, right? We destroyed that Jim Crow law, and we put it under our feet. So we thought, but the supermajority came in with SB 7066, and now they're telling us that we have to pay court cost fees and restitution. But I want to ask the people, how can you afford to pay court cost fees and restitution when your hands are tied as far as getting a job, getting an education, finding a reasonable place to stay, a roof over your head? How can you also pay this year court cost fees and restitution? So there are still millions of individuals that's out there, and we are out trying to reach them. We have surveys. We're asking if you know anyone that has court cost fees or a felony on their record, to contact us. So we're out there, we're doing a survey. But one of the things that DeSantis did is that he started, we call it police, election police force. There was $2 million poured into this department. And when you think about it, he said that 2020 election was secure. It was fine. And then he did a backwards flip. And he said, oh, no, we had to defend election integrity. So we're asking, well, what's the problem? So they're passing all of these and funding all of these here departments and millions of dollars. He just got an increase of over $1 million for the department. But we are not going to stop. We believe it's more of intimidation so that people won't come out to vote, but we won't stop. We want the people to realize we want you to contact one of these organizations, Black Voters Matter, Legal Woman Voter, Harriet Tubman, any one of these ACLU, any one of these organizations that's out there to see if you are eligible to vote, because most likely you are eligible to vote. And we want to make certain that you get out and vote, because when you vote, we win. And if you think about it, if we can change lives 1.5, get them in there and vote, million people, we win. That would be a landslide. Because as the film was showing, over 60% of the Black folks in the community voted Democrat. Not to say that, this is all about the Democratic Party, but this is a party that's fighting for democracy. This is a party that's fighting for liberation. This is a party that's fighting for DEI and fighting for freedom as a whole. What Americans supposed to be. So it has been a long journey, but it has been worth my while. I enjoy what I do, and I will continue to get out and fight for everyone to be able to vote. It's all right. We pay taxes, so we should be able to vote. You should be able to have a say, but it's our voice. Voting is our voice. Voting is something that we all should be able to do, and that's why we all should be able to vote.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And this has been a long fight, right? And you mentioned something as you were sharing, and I'm all about connecting dots for folks. I mean, I feel like we're having a conversation, use as an educational moment. You said supermajorities. I think I just want to do a little plug here and just connect the dots for folks and just talk about how the GOP supermajorities and various state legislators are becoming significant barriers to the progress that we're talking about right now, by implementing and upholding policies that suppress voting rights, policies that entrench, partisan power. And these supermajorities, they often pass, these restrictive laws. They pass unfair policies and practices that are not reflective of the needs of the people. They manipulate these, these district boundaries and maps through gerrymandering to maintain power. And this is another reason why, voting is important. Having these type of supermajorities, really distorts political representation and power and the voice of, of our communities. So I did want to just connect those dots for folks that all of this is connected. We talk about these issues as if they are siloed, but these issues intersect. And so the work that you all do, the work that Black Voters Matter does, even the work that Brave New Films is doing by capturing and telling these stories, making sure that we can shift the narrative and build ideological power is important. So thank you again, Rosemary, for sharing. And I want to talk about moving forward, right? I think it's important to, yes, we're talking about all these issues, that are happening, but I think it's important for also to stay rooted in the tradition of the Black radical imagination, right? And just, all is not lost, right? We have to look forward and make a plan, to progress, right? And so I want to just talk about one, what are the key lessons, of importance? If we can take some, from the 2018 race. I know the film used that, but just the key lessons on how we can move forward and just highlighting how voter education and empowerment, is critical. But what are some of the key takeaways and in what ways can they be applied in the upcoming elections? And what can we say to those that are watching that may feel like this is a lot? What can we do, right? And this is for everyone.
Well, I'll chime in on the need for us to think big and be bold. And so one of the ways in which we are doing that at Black Voters Matter is we're talking proportional representation. We're 6 years out from the next census. And that particular census is rolling up on an expiration date for the VRA, pushing for a state voting rights act, even in the South, right? Like, you got to think big. A voting rights act was introduced. It had overwhelming support. Yes. Did it pass? It did not. It didn't even make it out of committee. But that should not keep us from trying and really radically reimagining what this democracy looks like. We all know the runoff system is set up to keep Black people out. And quite frankly, it has made both parties very lazy in terms of their engagement with the people that put them in power. In many ways, we've gotten used to that. So we think that's just the way things are. That's the way we have to do it. And that's not true, right? Finally, we're talking about term limits for Supreme Court justices. There's a lack of trust that has filtered down from SCOTUS all the way down to just trust in our judicial independence now. And so I think it's a prime opportunity to be bold and think big. And, we do policy corners at Black Voters Matter as well to engage the public. And we understand and we acknowledge that people are just trying to make it day to day. Rent is too damn high. They're trying to get bills paid. They're trying to meet their basic needs. And that's important for us to lean into that and acknowledge and respect that. And also figure out how we have those conversations with folks around how we think about our democracy, how we show up in space. I'm with you. All hope is not lost. There are many ways in which we can do this and be bold about it, right? Like, we've already seen what the other side is doing, but I think that we are at a precipice where we can really think big here.
Thank you for sharing. Rosemary?
Well, I say we fight back. I say that we make a plan to vote. And I say that we get involved. We volunteer. We get involved. We knock on doors. We start believing that we're winning. We start walking in victory because I believe we won. If we get out and vote, we will always win. So everyone needs to make sure they check their voting status, check it 45 days at least, so that you have time. If you make a plan to vote, decide if you're going to do the mail-in, vote on election day or early voting. And even if you do early voting, which is good. I think it's good because the lines won't be long. You don't have to worry about that. So check your voter ID. Make certain that you have the proper ID. So I think if we do these things, encourage your friends, encourage your neighbor. And I think if we do these things, I believe that we will have a great turnout. And I believe that we can change what's the narrative, number one, in the system that we have today, because make America great again doesn't work for Rosemary.
Yeah, it didn't work for me either, Rosemary. Not just you. It don't work for me, and I'm sure it don't work for the. Rosemary, you hit on something. You listen. You in my wheelhouse. You hit on when you talk about narrative, and we're talking about when you said we just have to shift the way we think about this. You're talking about building ideological power. We often talk about building political power, collective power, which is important. But if we do not have that ideological power that that this can even happen, right? It impacts our perception, right? So, I believe that who controls the narrative controls the power. So I think, shout out to Black Voters Matter for having this, this screening, because, events like this and films and projects like this are ways for us to reclaim our narrative, to shift public perception, because public opinion has an impact on public policy. There's a whole school of thought that talks about that, right? Thank you all both for sharing. I want to make sure we leave space for questions from those that are watching. So if we have any questions, we'll take those now. So let's see, Valerie. Valerie says, what can folks in largely blue states do to advocate for voting rights, fight voter suppression in those states that are suppressing the vote?
Well, I can speak to some of the things I'm already seeing blue states do. Like I said, being bold and being radical. A lot of states are taking, like Michigan, are taking the initiative to do their own Voting Rights Act, right? With remedies, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen in DC with the National Voting Rights Act, John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So a lot of the states are taking the initiative. And I will always encourage folks voting is a tool, right? It's not the only thing in your toolbox. I would even argue if you are an attorney and election law is your thing, please volunteer to help folks. Walk them through these election laws. Florida has a legal monitor program in Texas. in partnership with, I believe it's We the Action and Civic Nation. Like, there are ways to show up in space that are needed. Be a poll monitor, be a poll worker. You can be, you can also help phone bank, do all the traditional things, but I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. But I'm already seeing blue states do some really bold work, particularly with those state voting rights acts with very clear remedies. Minnesota put proportional RCV as one of the remedies in their recently passed voting rights act. So we have to think big again. Like, I'm already seeing it. So I think that, those are some of the ways that I'm already seeing folks step up to the plate, and also acknowledge that election protection work, it doesn't end on election day, right? It goes beyond that, and making sure people have access to the ballot, and are treated equitably and fairly at the polls.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I didn't know if you wanted to add something, Rosemary. I definitely have something to add to that.
Yeah. In Florida, we have the Harry and Harriet Voting Act, Moore, excuse me, the last name is Moore Voting Act. And so we're going to continue to push that until we get it through. And how are we going to get it through? We need to come out and vote so we can change things.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And bring in people that have humanity's best interests. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. If you get out there and vote for issues that matter to you,
right,
humanity wins.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, supporting, tap in with your local advocacy groups, contributing, not just donations, but, volunteering your time and supporting those efforts and amplifying those efforts, raising awareness within communities that you are trusted messengers in. Because a lot of these groups aren't trusted. They're not going to be trusted messengers in all the communities. There is something unique about, like, just what are you doing in your hood, right? Like, what are you telling your neighbor, like, it's happening? So, even being on this call right now, on this at this event right now, sharing what was learned here, like, with your neighbors, they can share with their neighbors, have these kitchen table conversations. I think we have to really get back to, because before, as a community, before we were able to have a storefront, like, Black folks had these community, conversations, these kitchen table conversations, some of the most impactful conversations that have shifted and shaped the country happen at somebody's kitchen table. Definitely support. I can't highlight enough, like, supporting efforts for equitable maps, fair redistricting, because that is a way to increase the voting power. Also, get involved, engage in local politics. I don't think we talk about that enough, that, change happens. Local politics is local. Get involved in your local government, school boards, or many of these policies and decisions that are impacting your quality of life, happens here. And then the big one, consider running for local office. Consider running for, let me tell you something, like, that is not I tell people, like, if you want to see change in your community, and if you got the time and you got the heart for it and you want to do it, run for local office. I'm all for people saying, I want to see change. Let me, or like Ryan, like you pointed out, if you have a certain skill, whether it's legal or policy, or, like, tap into using your skill set, in the pro-democracy ecosystem. But thank you so much, Valerie, for that question and for tuning in. Let's see, Daisy, how much truth is there to the news that Black folks are turning Republican and Trump supporters this time around? So there is, I'm gonna let y'all chime in, but I definitely want to highlight, because I recently did an interview with Capital B News, where we were talking about the rise of misinformation and disinformation that is targeting Black voters. And they even had an AI generated image that showed Black voters canvassing with Make America Great hat on, and, like, all this, like, there's an intentional narrative frame that, they're tracking disinformation, showing just what you just talked about. Now, myself, I have not, I don't know if Black Voters Matter or anyone else, but I have not looked at, the numbers per se, but I do know that there is actual evidence that there are disinformation campaigns that are pushing the narrative around the question that you just asked. So with that, for me, I don't know how much truth, is there to that, but I know there is a benefit, to one party for perpetuating that narrative.
Can I jump in?
Yes, do.
Okay. One of the things is we can't take it for granted. So we have to get out and we have to continue to do the work. What I learned, I believe it was last year or the year before last, is some of these folks that's doing voter registration were changing the party, because a lot of people don't go down that far or see that area, and they were changing them to Republicans. They were changing Democrat to Republicans. So what we're doing is we're out and we're asking people, making certain that they advocate for themselves, is to go to, pull up your information, your voter registration information, and check and make sure that your party is what you want it to be. So that is what we have noticed. But I don't take this for granted. One of the things I look at is how many people are registered in the United States. Whatever polls they're taking is small. It's not 1 million people, and that's what, over 300 million people that's probably registered to vote or eligible to vote. So if you look at the numbers, you see that it doesn't, affect a large amount of people. And then you have those that's getting paid to get up there and say whatever they're saying. So we have to be just careful, because that is disinformation and misinformation. So that's my
statement. Thank you. And I would say that disinfo and misinfo is probably one of the biggest threats this election season. It's a threat, period. But definitely we're seeing the rise. That's a whole nother, this fireside chat. Mm-hmm. And I would have to moderate.
Well, the assumption being made is that we all think alike. Yeah. And it still assumes that we're a monolith, which is so incredibly racist, to think that we're so disillusioned. Let's just all go vote for a certain candidate. That we're not a monolith, and it's a lot of disinformation, misinformation out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you buy the sneakers, maybe you do well. or if you buy the Bible, you can buy. I mean, what is it that you want? You can get a sneaker, you can get a Bible. What?
Yeah. But look, I'm not fooling with y'all, and I do want to thank Black Voters Matter for having this nonpartisan, conversation in this space. I often tell people we are definitely nonpartisan, but not blind. So there's, but thank you so much, Daisy, for that question. Let's see. Do we have, okay. Hi, Kylie. Okay. What can folks in deep red states do to feel like their voice is heard? Many people don't show out because the system is so against them already, and it's disheartening to constantly be pushed back. Yes, Kylie. Does anyone want to take that before I want to allow our panelists to?
Ooh, where would you like to dig in, Kylie? So this is where those conversations around year-round transformational relationship building are really effective, at least I'm going to speak for us at BVM. Like, it's not enough to just tell people to go vote, right? There has to be something after that people can hold on to and latch on to, and which is one of the things I think we have done well. We engage in community year-round, right? Because a lot of the time, I think to the point Kylie was kind of alluding to, I think when partisan politics, they've gotten to the point where they only want to talk to their base, or which is part of the problem. Like, you have non-party affiliated folks in the states like Florida that don't get really any engagement at all until like 2 weeks before the election or early vote. And so that's problematic on its own. But to also think that you only have to talk to a certain group of people turns folks who might be new to the process need to know where to go. Because I think sometimes it's just people not knowing where to go to get engaged, right? And then there's people who are disillusioned and need, maybe some nudging on how they can get involved in terms of the issues that they care about, right? This is not just a presidential election. This is down ballot. There are amendments on the ballot in quite a few states. So it's more than that. You have to talk from a framework of, okay, what are the issues you care about year round? How can we help meet those needs, if that makes sense? So it's about building those transformational relationships, in the long run, instead of just diving in and parachuting in 2 weeks before the election. That doesn't really build trust in communities that way.
And I would just like to say, you can start now by I'm gonna put a plug in by joining Black Voters Matter, and you can so you can start now. And because Harry Tubman Freedom Fighters, we're working with Black Voters Matter, we're partners, and we are out. We got 3 things that we can do. One is to build relationship with the community. Also, we can do the issue, as Ryan was saying, issue mining, and you can go out and you can, people can scan the card, or you can talk to them, whichever one you prefer to do, and they can answer this. They can complete a survey, and so that they would know that we are concerned about their issues, and we take those issues to your city council, we take them to your state representative, and we're telling this is what the people want, until they don't think that they're heard. But if you do that survey, they can be heard. If you join Black Voters Matter, I don't know what state you're in, but join the team, and then you can help make a change. We're out here fighting, and we need all hands on deck, every one of you.
And Ms. Rosemary, we're good to pack the court too. We'll pack the court and show up. You got to show up and show out. You got to let these elected officials see your face.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And thank you so much for that question, Kylie. I also just wanted to say that I think we also need to shift the narrative a little bit about like these red states, these deep red states. Some of these states are not deep red. They are overly oppressed states.
Gerrymandered.
Yeah, gerrymandered, voter suppressed states. So, and we have these GOP supermajorities that are in these states. So I think one of the things that we can do, and then it goes back to building an ideological power of what is possible, like really framing what is a win in these states. It's going to happen incrementally, like celebrating and acknowledging the small victories and how the small collective victories can equal like, a win, right? It's gonna take time. And again, thank you for the recommendations, Rosemary and Ryan, that you all made of how people can tap in and be a part of the change that they're hoping to see, in these states. But I do want to shout out, like, when I say it takes time, just shouting out Alabama and Louisiana. They recently won their fight for fair maps. So now they're going to get a second correctional district, which increases the voting power amongst Black voters in that state. And so that fight wasn't a rapid fight. It was, redistricting cycles to get to this. And so it's going to take us continuously showing up. It's going to take us staying engaged, and informed. I wish that I could snap my fingers and it'll all be okay. But, we just have to keep at it. Right. We just have to keep at it. So I don't think we have any more questions. I think that was the last question. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. The insights shared here by our panelists. Thank you all. I'll give you all a virtual round of applause. I think, the insights that you all shared, really have underscored the critical fight against voter suppression and also this deep-seated legacy of white supremacy that's targeting Black voters. And I also want to give a special thank you to Brave New Films for capturing the lived experiences and also connecting the dots for folks around this fight. This can be a tool that we use. I encourage folks to use this tool, this film, to raise awareness around this issue for folks who might not feel that there even is an issue. You heard from people who actually lived and breathed this issue, that actually have gone through these tactics that we're fighting against. And so share that with people and raise awareness awareness and, and encourage folks to, again, to stay engaged and informed, and most importantly, to turn out to the polls and vote. Our vote has so much power. If it didn't, why are we doing all this? Like, why are they doing all this? Why are they trying to suppress it, right? So with that, I just want to thank everyone. And I want to, as we head out, I would love to give Ryan and Rosemary last word. If you all want to give a short, brief call to action, or if you may say enough said, I've said what I had to say. Period.
Never. We always got something to say, and I have something to say because I don't want us to miss this. When we get out to vote, I continue to say we win. When we fight back, we win. Maryland Governor Moore, it was how many? 700 and something thousand. Oh no, 175,000 clemency because of marijuana. So 175 individual is now free from enslavement. So when we get out the vote, we put people in office that is going to free our people from the chain of this criminal justice system. So I just want everyone to, acknowledge that and get out and vote, register, get the people, your family, your friends, and let them know it's time. In the old days, I think they used to bring the pitchforks and everything else, but yeah, it's a fight.
Ooh, the visuals. I go, that's a documentary. Go ahead, right? I guess Ryan said that's enough said, Ryan.
Have fun.
No, I would say I'm going to end like our illustrious co-founders. Black Voters Matter 365. Can't stop, won't stop, and we fight back.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. All right. Peace, everyone.
Peace.
Go vote.
Thank you all.